Okay, let me go to the third part on aligning agriculture and climate change policies. What we found in our experience is that climate change policy, in most countries you find both a national climate change policy and agricultural policy. Usually the agricultural policy is managed by the Ministry of Agriculture, climate change by Ministry of Environment. In many cases the climate change policy, the strategy is to integrate into sectoral policies. But the integration of climate change in agricultural policy is much more limited. So that the climate change policy is usually newer as well. It's something that's been developed more recently. And so that a big piece of the climate change policy is to say we must integrate into these sectors, whereas the ag policy in many cases has been drawn up without any specific reference to climate change, although even that's changing. They're often not well aligned, the climate change and agricultural policies. This is something we've found frequently to be the case because they do not manage well the trade-offs that can result between both climate change and ag policies. And this could be a big problem, and it is actually a problem, in getting the agricultural access to climate change financing. So I'll go into that in a bit. Some of the key areas for alignment between the two that we found, first of all, the time frame was often different. So like say the climate change would be talking about a 50-year time frame and the agriculture a 20-year time frame. They don't have to be the same, but you have to recognize that it's, the objectives, it varies if you're looking over different time frames. And certainly the objectives are different. So if you have a climate policy that is to reduce the emissions, whereas agriculture is to maximize growth, you can be looking at some pretty serious contradictions between the policies. Also, what we found in our work on this, that there was a lot of variation between the ag and climate change policies on the potential role of traditional knowledge and techniques and science-based technologies. You find a lot of mention of traditional technologies in climate policy and much more on science-based in agriculture. Diversification comes up quite a bit in the climate policies where specialization can be a big focus in ag policy, and sort of the role of intensification and resource use efficiency. So these are some of the things that can be looked at, and they don't have to be the same, but they have to be coordinated so that in the same country with the same people, you don't have contradictory actions. This one I'm going to skip over, I think. It was just to indicate that this is an analysis of the sources of agricultural growth, and what it shows is that land use change, increased extensification of agricultural systems is still a key source of growth, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, although intensification and resource use efficiency is increasing in certain areas. So it's just to illustrate that there's still some trade-offs between climate change and agricultural policies, but also some convergence. And this is the last section on financing climate-smart agriculture. First, there's a major financing gap to meet the current agricultural policy objectives. So basically, projection of agricultural growth needed to reduce food insecurity and to feed growing populations without taking the effects of climate change into that. There's insufficient investment resources to meet that. Not only that, the public sector resources that are devoted to agriculture are often not that well targeted to meet the long-term objectives of this agricultural growth for food security. So we have a situation, we don't have enough money, the money we have is not being spent in the best way, and not only that, it's going to cost a lot more money to deal with adaptation and mitigation. There's all kinds of estimates of how much and over what time frame and what assumptions, but it's pretty clear that it would be a significant increase. So clearly we have a financing gap, and climate finance can play an important role in meeting that. This slide I'm just going to skip over. It just shows that there was a declining. It's not only that there's not enough finance going to agriculture, that in some cases it's actually declining. Okay, so what is the role of climate finance for climate-smart agriculture? Climate finance, what are we talking about here? It's financing that's coming through different channels related to adaptation mitigation, and a lot of that is under the UNFCCC, and I'll show you a slide about that in a minute. But it's different than ag finance, and that's what's interesting about it, is that it could bring a whole new source of money into the agriculture sector. It's a small but significant share of finance, so, although it could grow to be more than small. But at this point, the overall investment needs of the agricultural sector are mostly to be met by, will be mostly met by agricultural financing sources. Climate finance would only be a small share of that, but it could be quite a significant leverage in order to support agricultural finance. There's still, I mean, this has been over 10 years now, but the financing mechanisms and institutions are only now being developed to support particularly climate-smart agriculture. The specific features of climate-smart agriculture that we need is, as I showed you, there's a big need for financing to support long-term transitions so that you can get over that 5-year gap when the income goes down and comes up. So there's sort of innovative credit programs. Focusing on building resilience versus just average productivity gains, which is where a lot of the ag investment finance goes. And as Alexander Maybeck made the point very strongly before, the attention financing for efficiency of input and resource use and adaptive capacity and flexibility. Now, some of the key issues about the main sources of funding are being built under the negotiation process of the UNFCCC. But these are the issues there. First of all, agriculture is mostly absent in the negotiations. It's been a controversial issue. It's not being well dealt with in the negotiation. The most prominent part that relates to agriculture that is included is land use change. So agriculture expansion onto forest land. So that would come under the FAO and also the RED type financing. It's also been an issue of the climate financing instruments that are being developed, in most cases in the past, have been separated adaptation and mitigation. So we had the National Adaptation Plans of Action, we had Nationally Appropriate Mitigation Action, the NAMAs. Whereas in climate smart agriculture, we're trying to capture the synergies between adaptation, mitigation, food security. And so we were looking for financing streams that reward that reward actions that give you adaptation, mitigation together. And there's some emerging opportunities for that. Now, the Green Climate Fund has been established. It is projected to have funds up to $100 billion per year by 2020. And they're just now in the phase of developing their financing mechanisms. But it would seem that they would also have a focus on combining adaptation and mitigation actions. So that's something we're very much looking forward to. The GEF 6 has just been announced. It's the largest allocation of GEF resources ever, and there is climate smart agriculture is in that, although there's still a separation of mitigation and adaptation in some aspects. And also the biocarbon fund, which deals much more in carbon markets and offsets. There's increased tendency towards looking at a blend of adaptation and mitigation actions. This is my last slide. There are also new opportunities arising, and this year there's quite a bit of activity around the building of a global climate smart agriculture alliance. And the idea here is to promote the upscaling of climate smart agriculture at a global level. The alliance is being built to be food security focused, agricultural driven, and action oriented. And it includes a lot of partners, including countries such as South Africa, Vietnam, Netherlands, US, and I believe now there's more and more countries joining, as well as agencies such as FAO, World Bank, IFAD, NEPAD, and other regional organizations. The alliance is being built in 2014, and the plan is to launch it in September 2014 at the UN Climate Summit. And there's consultations being undertaken in these next few months. And the expectation is that this, too, could be a great support for knowledge, technology, policy frameworks, and financing. But this is just currently under construction, so we'll see exactly how it ends up. But it looks like it has quite a bit of potential to be an instrument to support climate smart agriculture.